So there I was in the grocery store earlier today having a meltdown. Several of the products I usually buy have been removed from the shelves permanently. As an autistic celiac person, probably with ARFID, this is a big deal. It's hard enough to find food I can eat, let alone anything that has nutritional content. So the foods I can eat I stick to like glue. And aside from that, I also shop for other autistic celiac family members, so trying to meet all of our needs is difficult. So when stores arbitrarily change product lines for the purpose of trying to get people to adopt new things and subsequently to increase their profit, it makes our autistic lives much more difficult. So this got me thinking about change in general, and how as autistic people, change can be really tough to deal with. Hi, I'm Phil, a late diagnosed autistic older adult, and it's my goal to advocate for autistic people by sharing positive information about autism, busting the myths and sharing my own stories along the way. Plus, this is my 50th episode, so thanks for joining me. Today I want to take a look at change and why it can be challenging for autistic people, and how we can better support the autistic people in our lives and in the world around us. But this is a complex topic, so strap in as we dive headlong into change. We live in a fast-paced world where things change constantly. Technology is advancing daily. Cities and suburbs are growing at a relentless pace. Work environments and expectations evolve and morph to try to keep pace with customer expectations. And even our family lives change constantly. But all this change can be so difficult for autistic people. Despite this, change is not bad in itself. Without change, we would be living in a dark, brutal, dangerous world. But likewise, not all change is good. In modern workplace culture, there seems to be an element of seeking change for its own sake, as a way of shaking things up and not letting anyone settle into a routine. For some strange reason, this type of change is considered positive, with a belief that it drives innovation. Maybe that has some truth, but for many people, and in particular autistic people, this approach can be damaging. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not opposed to positive constructive change. And in fact, in a previous job, I was responsible for enacting significant change, and I was very good at it. But I also had a few mantras I developed around change through my professional experience. Firstly, change for change's sake is bad change. This goes back to the earlier statement that many people seem to imagine that by randomly changing and mixing things around, there will magically emerge some better outcome. And to be fair, this is how biological evolution works, and it's been pretty successful. The downside is that, at least in the case of biology, this success has taken millions of years. So the reality is that random change, or change for the sake of change, is a very inefficient way of conducting change. We've been given a brain, so let's use it. So what then comes along is change that has no explanation. This type of change is caused when someone uses their brain to bring about change, but fails to communicate the reasons or hides that reason for some purpose. And this is where my second mantra kicks in. Change without reason is an agenda. This often sudden change can feel random, but the truth is someone is directing the change with a certain outcome in mind and is using lack of transparency as a way of achieving a goal. I think of this type of change as being dishonest, as it is designed to manipulate people to act before they are aware of either why they are acting or the outcome that has been predetermined. Thus, it is an agenda. And I'm sure many of us have been on the receiving end of situations like this. So why might autistic people in particular find change difficult? There are several reasons for this, so let's go through them. Firstly, the autistic brain, as we have said many times before, works differently to allistic or, in other words, non-autistic brains. In this instance, what I'm referring to is that autistic people often experience monotropic focus. That means we focus intently, predominantly on one thing at a time. So any change requires breaking this single-minded thinking approach to head in a new direction, or even to stop completely what we are focused on. And this is hard for autistic people. An example of this for me was in a previous job I worked in. We were providing audiobooks to people with print disabilities as a free service, and I had worked doing that for 20 years. At a point in time, it was decided by the upper management of the organisation that this work was to cease, and my team and I were to be made redundant. Now, redundancy is always going to be a difficult process, but for me and the others doing this work, our focus on helping people with print disabilities had been absolute for several decades. So breaking this monotropic focus in this work was actually more than difficult. It was truly distressing. Another and maybe more mundane example of change, breaking this monotropic focus, might be when we are focused on a special interest and our partner or family member comes and tells us we need to eat or do a specific chore, or maybe someone is at the door for us. This break in our monotropic focus will most likely be difficult for any autistic person. A little similar to the previous point, autistic inertia is something that many autistic people experience. This means that any action we are currently engaged in will be difficult to stop to change to a new action. This idea of inertia comes from Newton's first law of motion, which states an object at rest will remain at rest and an object in motion will remain in motion and continue moving in a straight line at a constant velocity unless acted on by a force. Also called the law of inertia, it is the tendency of an object to resist change in motion. Just as in Newton's observations of the natural world, it is difficult for an autistic person to start a task, as this is also a change that is naturally resisted. I know I find starting any new task extremely difficult. In preparing to write this podcast, I started on Saturday morning, but all the way through Saturday, I found the act of starting too difficult. And in this, I also let my ADHD take me down different paths with more dopamine satisfaction, rather than committing to writing. Likewise, all day Sunday, I found reasons not to start. So now it is Sunday evening, getting close to midnight, and I'm finally getting started. But now I am moving, and while I would rather go to bed because I'm really tired, I also can't stop. Another aspect common to many autistic people is a pattern of rigid thinking styles. Rigid thinking can be a coping strategy for autistic people by creating predictability in an otherwise random world. This means that when we have settled on something, it can be difficult to change our mind or our approach to that thing or task. This manifests in the autistic person developing routines in many aspects of life, and any change from those routines can cause distress. We spoke about routines in the previous podcast, so check that out if you haven't seen it yet. As we spoke about last time, rigid thinking can make change feel threatening and overwhelming. Rigid thinking can also lead to other aspects like literal interpretations and inflexible thoughts. Rigid thinking can also lead to perseveration, which is the involuntary repetition of thought or behaviour beyond a natural ending point. This can look like not being able to change topics in conversation easily. This is a big one for me when a conversation topic changes and my body aches with the effort of having to change with that. Or maybe trying to steer the conversation back to that topic to see it to a more natural ending point. But it may also look like a difficulty in transitioning to a new activity, which we will return to in more detail shortly. Perseveration may also look like being unable to change thought patterns to stop thinking about worries or stresses. For me, this happens when I lie awake in bed, unable to sleep, endlessly worrying about a single topic. This might be a phone call I need to make the next day, or a work engagement I've agreed to in 3 months' time. But the thought cycle is endless, compounding the anxiety. Now, a brief note. Perseveration is a more complicated word than I would normally be inclined to use, but I do so here as it is specifically used in the diagnostic criteria for autism. Change does not need to be big or life-changing to be challenging for autistic people. Small, everyday transitions may also cause daily struggles. Some of these might include getting out of bed, having a shower, getting out of the shower, starting work or school for the day, stopping work or any other task to eat, drink or use the toilet, leaving the house for any reason, and even going to bed, or maybe even getting out of the car when arriving at the destination. ADHD can also significantly affect change for those of us who experience ADHD with our autism. While our autism may resist change, our ADHD may be constantly seeking change, causing a constant internal struggle. Beyond that, ADHD may make the actual process of change difficult. This can be because of executive functioning challenges associated with ADHD, leading to challenges with planning, organising and executing tasks required to complete the change. Time blindness is another key feature of ADHD, which can make it hard to accurately perceive the passage of time and thus how long a task will take. This can make last-minute change particularly challenging for ADHD people. Emotional dysregulation is also common in both autism and ADHD, and this can lead to anger or frustration at last-minute changes. Another aspect of change that many people would consider trivial is the fact that change so often involves interaction between people, and in some cases causing the need for interactions with new people. Both of these scenarios can be difficult for an autistic person, as people interactions can be one of the hardest aspects of autism to navigate. So creating the need for new or more extensive interactions is an aspect of change that is often unwelcome. In the context of social interactions, we may struggle to adapt when plans change. It may take us a significant amount of preparation to leave the house to attend a social gathering. This may be in the form of scripting, needing to know who might be there, what food is going to be available, how long the event will last, how we will get there, and so many more details. So when plans change at the last minute, this can cause high levels of stress, as there may not be enough time to retrace all these steps to adapt to the new plans. Likewise, changes in our sensory environment can cause extreme dysregulation. Most autistic people have significant sensory sensitivities in any or all of our sensory systems. When senses are either under or overstimulated, we will find ourselves in a state of high-level dysregulation, which can lead to meltdowns and shutdowns. This situation can be complicated further when our environment changes suddenly and we go into sensory overstimulation instantly. For an example here, imagine walking into a party or nightclub and the quiet of outside instantly transitions to a loud, crowded and visually cluttered and dynamic environment. Then add that to the social interaction challenges that autistic people face. Instant overwhelm. Or for a more mundane example, it's summer here at the moment, but today is cold. Now, I have not worn long trousers for weeks, if not months, and tonight we went to the in-laws' house for dinner. I tried wearing long pants, but that change of having material against my legs for the first time, maybe since before Christmas, was too overwhelming, and I had to return to put my shorts on and free my legs. As mentioned earlier, work environments can be constantly changing, which can be also overwhelming. New roles, team members, projects, clients, and changing rules and expectations, all creating unique challenges. And of course, changes in family situations. Arrival of children or grandchildren, adult children leaving home, or relationships ending. Then there might also be housing changes. This might even include selling the family home to move to a retirement village. Health can also change in an instant, in ourselves or our loved ones. And inevitably loved ones will die, and with this change comes grief and a whole new set of challenges and even expectations from other people. What can't be underestimated when it comes to change is the level of anxiety that change will introduce into the autistic person's life. Anxiety is a key part of the autistic experience as we try to navigate a world that is not designed for how our brains function. So most autistic people will be living day to day with at least some level of anxiety, and for some this daily anxiety is bordering on crippling. So introducing change, even positive change, can make these anxiety levels escalate further. Another consequence of change to an autistic person is the possibility of triggering rejection sensitivity. Rejection sensitivity is a very common feature of the autistic experience and is triggered when the autistic person anticipates or perceives rejection. So think about it. If you have an autistic person working on a project and you induce change into that situation, the autistic brain will jump straight away to conclusions such as, my work is no good, my work is not important, or I am a failure. On the flip side of this is that rejection sensitivity may also change how the autistic person responds to changes. In the workplace, that might mean the autistic person leaves that job. But rejection sensitivity in relationships may cause the autistic person to walk away, even if the rejection was unintended. Another common autistic trait is demand avoidance. So any change can easily trigger demand avoidance in autistic people. Change is absolutely a demand, so expect some pushback. Another aspect about change is that it can be exclusive. This can be even more pertinent to autistic people because we will find change more difficult than those around us, and thus may be slower to adapt or come to terms with change. This might also result in the autistic person being excluded. If the autistic person is unable to adapt or accept the change, it might be that they disengage. This can mean the loss of relationships or social engagements, leading to isolation, loneliness, and subsequently to depression or worse. But it could also be that the autistic person just takes longer to adapt to the change, even though we might get there eventually. But this delay compared to the people around us might mean we are either left behind or labelled as difficult or inflexible, or singled out and excluded. When making change, it may be beneficial to keep track of how the autistic person is coping and adapting. And because of alexithymia, which is the inability to recognise or effectively communicate our own emotions, it may even be that as autistic people, we might even be unaware of the negative impacts change is having on us internally, until maybe we suffer a health event like a breakdown or worse, which in my case was having a stroke during a period of intense change. So how can we make change more accessible to autistic people? Communicate, communicate, communicate. Be clear about why the change is happening, why it is necessary, who will benefit, and what are the consequences. Don't play games with information or with people. If the change is going to be negative to the autistic person, be honest and upfront. The one thing that it is important to understand about autistic people is that we value honesty and plain speech. Don't hide the facts thinking you are protecting the autistic person. Don't say one thing and do another. This is probably the worst outcome. A saying that is popular in autistic circles is say what you mean and mean what you say. Also be aware of any supports the autistic person might need to negotiate the change. Again, the best way to discover this is to ask the autistic person. Don't assume that some generic advice from the internet will be suitable. Autistic people are generally logical thinkers, so while we don't typically like change, we may be the first in the group to understand why it might be necessary and then come on board as allies. And as we said earlier, change for change's sake is bad change. So understand your reasons for the change and communicate them clearly. This also avoids the second change mistake, that change without reason is an agenda. Communicate, communicate, communicate. And all that from an autistic person who is supposed to be bad at communicating. Well, stereotypes just don't work. So I hope this little primer on autistic change has been helpful. I'm still processing that change I mentioned at the top of the items at the grocery store no longer being available. Yes, change is often hard, but it is sometimes also necessary. Let's just make sure the change we make is positive, inclusive, and well communicated. And then maybe change can also be good. If this has been useful and you would like more thoughts and stories from an older autistic bloke, please consider liking, subscribing and sharing these podcasts. Also, feel free to jump into the comments section and tell me about change in your life that either went well or badly from an autistic point of view. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.